Welcome back to the section dedicated to molten carbonate fuel cell. One of the big advantages of this technology is high temperature. It's a big advantage because we can use low-cost catalysts, such as nickel instead of platinum, and because we can use different fuel from the pure hydrogen. Typical technology temperature are in the range of 600 and 700 Celsius degrees. This mainly provides us a technology that bases temperature in 650 degrees Celsius and is in the range of high temperature fuel cells. Of course, this gives a lot of advantage technically for what is related to improving reaction kinetics. Noble material not required, and nickel provides sufficient catalytic activity, but even more important, there is a resistance to carbon monoxide that is not a poison for this technology, and it's even more, it can be used as a fuel. As a drawback, of course, we have an increased risk of corrosion due to high temperature and to the presence of carbonates that are corrosive. That will bring to a reduction of components' lifetime and an impact on fuel cell mechanical stability. For example, high temperature cause some issues on the stress between materials, especially when we have thermal transient, a variation of temperature, or simply when we need to switch off or switch on the system, and so it requires some time to reach temperature, and in this process we may have some issues of material stability since we use different material sandwiched together to produce a fuel cell, a molten carbonate fuel cells. But going back to the opportunity related to the fuels, one of the main interests of this technology is that we can feed a molten carbonate fuel cell with other kind of fuel that is not hydrogen. For example, we can use methane. What happens inside the anode is that we have 650 degrees temperature and the presence of catalysts that enhance steam reforming reaction. It means that if we provide not only methane but also steam, we can have a reaction of 1 mole of methane that reacts with 1 mole of steam to produce 1 mole of carbon monoxide and 3 moles of hydrogen. What is interesting at equilibrium is also that when we need to provide steam, but at the same time we produce steam at the end. So we can also have a sort of self-supply of steam inside the cell itself. But the condition of the anode allows also to reach an equilibrium for what is the shift reaction. The water gas shift is balanced by 1 mole of carbon monoxide reacting with 1 mole of steam to produce carbon dioxide and hydrogen. This means that from 1 mole of methane we can get up to 4 mole of hydrogen to feed the reactions. So reactions are the same, but with the advantage of having hydrogen as a fuel and no risk of corrosion or of degradation caused by carbon monoxide or methane that are not a poison for the technology. But there is also an option in which carbon monoxide itself could react inside the cell. So we may have the production from the steam reforming that can go for 2 different ways. From in one direction, reacting with steam, that is the most diffuse one, to produce carbon dioxide and hydrogen. And in the other side, we can also have a direct electrochemical reaction involved with carbon monoxide. Like having 1 mole of carbon monoxide reacting with 1 mole of carbonate to produce 2 mole of carbon dioxide and again electricity to the system. So what happens is that we can use a lot of different fuels compared to the only hydrogen. At system level, this becomes a big advantage since we can use different fuel from different origin that may produce inside the cell methane or outside in the system at system level. We show the reforming of methane, but of course it's not the only kind of carbon-based fuel that can react inside the anode. For sure, we can have hydrocarbons like natural gas or similar, or we can have syngas that can be derived from several processes, for example, gasification of biomass or of coal. And we can have biogas from anaerobic digestion. It means that it's a mixture between natural gas and carbon dioxide. And finally, also landfill gas that is in this composition similar to biogas and from anaerobic digestions. Of course, all these processes need to undergo a cleanup process to avoid any kind of contaminant that can cause damage to the molten carbonate fuel cell. Not carbon monoxide, as we said, but like sulfur, or for example, or chlorine may be an issue for the catalytic activity of the anode. So hydrogen production can be realized inside the anodic channel or in the at system level. So that makes this technology extremely interesting because we do not need an hydrogen infrastructure, and we take advantage of an existing infrastructure, for example, natural gas one. So we can feed this molten carbonate fuel cell system directly with natural gas. The technology that we described, it enhances the reaction inside the anodic chamber, and usually there are two ways of optimizing this. From one side, we can have reaction directly inside the anodic chamber for what is called a direct internal reforming, or we can also have a chamber close to the anode, a separate area, separate reactor, but inside the cell. So we can, in the sandwich, in the pile of layers, we can introduce a specific layer to enhance internal reaction. This is what is called an indirect internal reforming. Another interesting aspect is the one related to pressure operation. So the reaction of fuels can change depending on temperature, of course, but in this case we don't have big variation for what is this technology, but for sure it plays an important role. But also pressure can be important. For example, we can have inside the cell undesired reaction, like carbon deposition. It's called the Boudoirs reaction, in which we have carbon monoxide that doesn't react with steam to produce hydrogen, but reacts itself with 2 moles of carbon monoxide that produce carbon dioxide and solid carbon. This is an issue for 2 reasons. First of all, we lose an amount of hydrogen that can be produced, and solid carbon can poison the cell, reducing the catalytic activity or just making a deposit inside the cell. Another undesirable side reaction that are favored by the higher pressure is methane formation. Also, in this is exactly the opposite reaction of steam reforming, and also in this case we have an utilization of hydrogen not in the electrochemical process but in a chemical process. So we synthesize methane inside the cell that is not a useful output for the system. Vice versa, we also have an advantage in increasing pressure, reducing another reaction that is undesired, that is the cracking. Also in this case we have not electrochemical reaction of methane that doesn't go into steam reforming, but it goes to cracking, producing hydrogen, but also at the same time carbon, solid carbon, with the same issues related with Boudoirs reaction. While usually water-gas shift, that is one of the most important reactions inside the anode, is not affected by the influence of pressure. Thank you.